Okay. All right, welcome to the live stream. I'm going to be continuing this project, working on sculpting Charlie Kirk. That's what I'm going to be doing today. And I've added on some boards here on the side. I don't know if you can see that very well. Let me back up the camera a little bit, actually. Okay. So I put in some, yeah. I was trying to figure it out to stream on another, well, to stream through Rumble to YouTube, but wasn't able to figure that out. So I'm just on YouTube exclusive. I'm gonna grab a hammer because I found that putting these larger chunks of clay when it's a little bit colder, it's a little bit easier if you just hammer it in place. Don't have to fight it as much. The weather's cooling off a little bit, and I still don't have air conditioning here in the barn, though, you know, hopefully I will at some point. Hi, hello. Good morning, if it's morning where you're at. For me, it's morning. It's 6:30 right now. For some reason, I couldn't sleep last night very well, so I was like up from like 2:30 to 3:30 just awake, and I figured, well, if I'm just going to be awake, I might as well do something. So I got up and you know, had some protein, went to the gym, and now here I am sculpting. But usually I wouldn't be up and awake until later in the day. Usually I'm kind of go to bed a little bit later and wake up a little bit later, but I shouldn't be that way, but that's just kind of how my schedule has been. But today I was up early. But we'll see, maybe I'll take a nap later or something. Usually I don't have a problem sleeping, but I did today. Good morning. Somebody says 6:30 for me as well. Somebody in a similar time zone. Yeah, it's Does your wife know you're up? Yeah. Yeah, I told her I couldn't sleep. She does for sure. Yeah, I can't even go to the bathroom at night without my wife noticing. For better or worse, that's how it is. Probably for better. Yeah, sometimes you just have those days where you guess maybe I'm getting older. You can't sleep as well sometimes. But sleep is important. I recommend it. I recommend sleep. Someone's asking, was something on my mind? I don't know. Maybe. I don't remember. There's always something on my mind. But usually those somethings don't keep me from sleeping. Yeah, this clay is a lot stiffer when it's cooler. Right now it's probably, it's not too bad. It's probably 65 or 60 here in the studio. But it's going to get really cold soon, so hopefully by that time I'll have most of the clay in place where it needs to be. Maybe that's why I couldn't sleep. Stuff on my mind here. That happens. I got a replacement mic. I think so I was using the Boya Magic mic before, and I think I just had a defective microphone. It didn't seem to be charging very well, and so I returned it and got another one. Hopefully this one works better, and if it doesn't, I'll return this one and just go with a different brand next time I get a wireless mic. You know, 2 strikes and you're out. But I've liked Boya. I've liked some of their budget microphones for other stuff, and so I wanted to give them another try, see if it was just maybe the charging case or something that wasn't working. My sister told me that sometimes when you can't sleep, God wants you to pray for somebody or something, or pray earlier. Well, that's good advice, I'd say. Prayer is always a good thing, so I think that's, if not being able to sleep helps you pray. That was one of the first things I did when I got up, was say my prayers, so but that's good way to look about it, or a good way to look at it. Think of somebody to pray for. Okay. Did it work magic? Sorry for the bad pun. I don't know about that. I don't know. Let me zoom in a little bit. Somebody's saying in all caps, "Sir, I'll be the only one to say this to you. You're creating a dangerous situation. It's tiptoeing idolatry. You are a great talent. You're responsible for this. It's dangerous." This is something you're actually not the first one that's mentioned idolatry, but we just have a different religious understanding of what idolatry is. Idolatry is something that comes between you and the one true God, something that you worship in place of God, and a monument is only an idol if it comes between you and God. That's what it is. And sculptures aren't the only things that can be idols. Anything that you can create, anything that's a likeness of things on earth or things in the heavens above, anything can be an idol, something that you put in the place of God where God should be. And so if you think that I worship Charlie Kirk, or if I pray to him, or if I view him as taking the place of God and Jesus Christ, well, then we just have a different religious worldview. We just have a different religion. I don't see it that way. I don't worship the sculptures that I make. I don't worship the creations of my own hands. I worship the God that created me, that created all things. So we just have a fundamentally different interpretation of what an idol is. And an idol is different than a monument. An idol is something you pray to, something that it's like a symbol that you take for the real thing. It's like you're praying to a sculpture, or you're praying to a monument. But a monument is not an idol, or it shouldn't be an idol. It's a different thing. It's to memorialize a person or the philosophy or ideas that they stood for. So I'm not creating this hoping that anybody will worship Charlie Kirk, and I don't think anybody really falls into that error, at least nobody that I know of. It's to remember what he stood for, which was sharing Christianity. He was very open about his Christian faith, and open dialogue, open debate, speaking with those who disagree with you. And I believe he was somebody worth memorializing. So there's a difference between idolatry and a memorial. Somebody says, "I have a way." Tell people it's not a thing to worship. Remind everyone that this is art. It's just art. Well, I think you might be confused. I don't think anybody is making that error. I don't think anybody is seeing this sculpture of Charlie Kirk and then worshiping it. So I think that might be a problem that is mostly invented in your mind. But I don't recommend people worship any statue. That's not what they're for. They're symbols like letters in the alphabet. They're ways to communicate ideas and philosophies and worldviews. It's just a means of communication. And anything can become bad if it's used for bad. Any form of communication or form of technology or whatever can be used for good or for evil, depending on what you choose. Hi, somebody's saying. Somebody else says, I like Charlie, but I don't worship him. I think it's important to tell the story because he was an innocent man who died over words. Yeah, he was a martyr for what he believed. Killed, ironically, by somebody who claimed that he was hateful. So somebody killed by somebody full of hate that claimed that Charlie Kirk was the hateful one. Hate has a way of twisting us in that way if we let it. That's why you got to be careful. Somebody's asking, Andrew, what do you think would be an appropriate reaction to all the people who are mocking Kirk's death the day of? Well, in fact, I stated publicly, I don't know, it might have been an overreaction, but I would say people that were celebrating or encouraging more of this, so the people that were like, oh, Charlie Kirk, now these are the people that should be next. Like that is that is supporting domestic terrorism. So my solution, what I said was that anybody that supported it should be removed from all federal government benefits, so like SNAP programs or any, if they're getting any type of welfare or anything like that, then they should be removed from those programs because they're domestic terrorist sympathizers, and I don't think we should fund domestic terrorist sympathizers. Maybe that's an overreach, but I don't think people are entitled to government benefits. It's basically something that I think you should be able to lose the ability. So I don't think, for the most part, I don't think people should be imprisoned for saying that they're happy that somebody died, but maybe you should lose some of your taxpayer funding. If you're a person that supports domestic terrorism, maybe you shouldn't be taxpayer funded. And I think that goes for individuals and organizations. I thought that was but maybe that's reaching too far, but I thought that was not an unreasonable thing at the time. But maybe I was being overly emotional. I don't know. But I do think it's evil. Certainly people should be shunned from society. If I was an employer and I saw that, then I would make sure that employee was no longer employed at whatever business I was running. And I think that's the thing about, and people would say, oh, that's just right-wing, like cancel culture or whatever. But the thing about cancel culture, the reason why it's bad is because people were being canceled for saying true things. That's why it was bad. For saying true things or good things, saying that men can't be women, or saying, having a stance that has nothing to do with your job. But if you're the type of person that condones domestic terrorism, like you're making the workplace unsafe, because a customer that you disagree with politically, like you are showing that you're okay with using violence against that person. And so I think you have shown, if you're the type of person that would celebrate the death of a innocent husband and father for political reasons, you've shown that you can't be trusted, that you're morally suspect because of your political extremism. And so I think, and that, that's not people that, there's a lot of people that say, well, he shouldn't have been killed, but, and then they, and then they go and list all the reasons why people should hate Charlie Kirk, even though I don't agree with their framing oftentimes. And I think that they're kind of just being more coy about their support of silencing people with violence. But I'm talking specifically about the people that were like, this is a good thing, like we should see more of this, like, and then whatever comments celebrating it. That's the type of comments I'm talking about. And I think it's, I think losing government benefits for a time, maybe a couple of years or something, I think it's like a timeout. It's like, oh, well, we don't want to fund you until maybe you've changed the way you conduct yourself publicly, because the federal government shouldn't be funding domestic terrorist sympathizers. I don't think that's unreasonable. Somebody says it's always the people in life who always try to come off the nicest or most impactful activists or most caring that be the total opposite, that are the total opposite. I mean, the kind. Somebody says, I mean, there kind of is because they're losing their jobs. Yeah, that's probably a more appropriate thing, is just for them to, you know, for the private industry to do it instead of a federal government approach to cracking down on people that have expressed their political views supporting violence. But I do think that that it's, you know, it goes to the point of supporting terrorism, which I think we should treat pretty seriously. Two types of clay or wax over clay. This is two different types of clay. One's this brown one that I'm using right now is a Nara clay that I got from Hobby Lobby. I got like 50 pounds of this stuff, and most of the body is made up of this stuff. And then over top of it, I've put some non-dry modeling clay, oil-based clay that I got from Dollar Tree. And it's the same type of clay that I also use for the head, though it's different color on the head because I mixed, it comes in a bunch of different colors, and I mixed a different color combination for the head, and hair is also a different one. So, but this is a different brand of clay. I don't like this one as much, but it's cheaper. So that's why I got it for the body area. And then I'll maybe leave it, I'll leave maybe this brown on the outside here, and then just do the blue up to the edge so that it goes blue here, and then the brown is just gives an idea of where that plane changes. And I like the blue because the reference image I have, I think he was in a blue suit with a red tie. Somebody says, I think it's important to portray him as he actually was. I think one side calling him Adolf's second coming are ridiculous, but so are the people pretending he was a saint, right? Question mark. Well, I certainly think he was closer to a saint than Adolf Hitler. You know, he appeared to live uprightly in his own personal life, and to teach good moral teachings from the Bible. I didn't see him teach or promote anything that was immoral in his public appearances or his public discourse. Though if you have evidence of something that was actually him promoting some sort of immoral behavior, then but I haven't seen that. So the people trying to make him out to be this, like some sort of bad person. And what gets me is a lot of these people that get after me for sculpting this monument of Charlie Kirk were all for all of the monuments to George Floyd, and George Floyd was a bad person. He was a career criminal, drug addict. He put a gun to a pregnant woman to rob her. He was just a bad person that the left turned into their martyr and the person that they made monuments to, and that they idolized. Because when you make an idol, when you make a monument to somebody, you're saying that this is somebody who should be remembered. And I don't think anything George Floyd did in his entire life is worth remembering. He just wasn't a good person. So why are they making memorials to him? Well, it's because the way he was killed, because he was black, or in their mind, killed by a white cop, though I think he just overdosed on drugs, because of how much drugs he had in his system. And I think the cop was just there detaining him using a technique that he'd been trained on, I think. And then the trial was a joke. They didn't even move the juries out of the place where all these riots were happening, so you can't call that a fair trial. You gotta protect the jurors and sequester them, and none of that happened. It was just like I don't think justice was served in that. And then a bunch of people, made monuments. And I didn't criticize anybody. I was, at the time, I didn't criticize anybody for making those monuments. But if you're going to criticize me for making a monument to a right-wing martyr, then I can criticize the left-wing martyr and the monuments made to a career criminal, and just a bad person that I don't think was worth remembering. And if he was a white guy killed by a white cop, or if the cop was a black guy, like, nobody would know his name. The only reason people know his name is because the races were convenient for the left's narrative that cops are like systematically killing minority individuals with that. And I don't think that that's not a true or a real thing that's happening. So he says, compared to Hitler, yes, Charlie is a saint. Yeah. Well, if you compare him to one of the most evil people of the 20th century, most successfully evil. I guess there's probably been more evil people than Hitler, but you just don't hear about them because they weren't as successful as Hitler in helping an entire nation turn evil, basically. Hitler was just a really successful evil person. There's probably plenty of evil people that just aren't as successful. As far as successful in doing harm and promoting the evil doctrine that he became obsessed with, if you can call that. I guess you wouldn't. Successful is probably not the right word, but maybe effective at promoting that wickedness. You can't argue with that he had captured, that a nation was captured by that idea, those ideas. Someone says, I agree the memorials were intended to be anti-police brutality, not pro-George Floyd. Well, I don't think you can differentiate that. I don't think you can make memorials to somebody without saying that this person did something that's worth remembering. And in the case of George Floyd, the thing that he did that the left saw as worth remembering was die. He died. They saw the way that he died as worth remembering, but if he was a different race, if the cop was a different race, they wouldn't have seen that as worth remembering. So it was entirely a fictional narrative, and it was the whole thing was a lie. Like they didn't even attempt to prove that it was racially motivated, that race had anything to do with, even if the cop did kill him, which is, I don't think that is the case. I think he just died of an overdose while the cop was detaining him using a technique that he had been trained to use. And George Floyd himself asked to be put on the ground. He was saying that he couldn't breathe before he got down on the ground, and he was clearly not in his right mind, and had 11 nanograms per milliliter, if I remember correctly, of fentanyl in his blood, and 5.6 nanograms per milliliter is enough to be considered a lethal dose. And people will say, oh, but like he had a higher tolerance. But if you have enough to be considered a lethal dose, then pretty much we can't rule out that you might have just died of an overdose. And I think that is a reasonable doubt that the jury should have had, that it might have just been an overdose. And then the fact that the judge wouldn't even let them play the training footage that taught officers to use that technique of kneeling on the neck to subdue people that are on the ground. That was something that he was trained to do. It wasn't just like he wasn't just like doing it for fun. He was doing it because that was the training that he received. So I think the whole thing was just a sham. So I think it was a false narrative, and George Floyd was a bad person that didn't deserve to be remembered or memorialized. But he was the left's martyr, because they didn't have martyrs. They didn't have people that were, good people that were killed by police or that were victims of assassinations, of right-wing assassinations. They didn't have good examples of that, so they just used what they had, which was a criminal who died in proximity to a police officer that that was the wrong race, according to them. So he says, I'm on the same boat as you, Mr. Keith, about Floyd. Yeah, well, maybe there's information I haven't seen, but the information I have seen certainly makes it suspect that the officer actually killed him, or actually maybe, and it not only did the officer have to have killed him, he has to have killed him on purpose, that he was trying to kill him, that technique was used to try to kill him, because that's what he was convicted for. And I think that the evidence for that is just not present. I think that's just not there. So he says, it's hard for me to be with either of these sides, man. The left does so much terrible stuff, but with the current right, it feels like every party is a bad party. Well, I think both parties are led by flawed people. People are flawed, so any organization that's run by people, which is all of them, is going to be flawed. But you have to judge a movement by its philosophy and by the results of that philosophy when you put it into practice. And I think there's no question that the philosophy of the left is more damaging to America and to individuals and families. And that just appears to be evident to me. But for me, one of the biggest political issues is abortion, which I feel very strongly is our greatest, the greatest moral failing of our nation, to allow so many sons and daughters to be killed who didn't do anything to deserve it. And so that's probably mostly the reason that whatever the problems are on the right, I can't be a Democrat, because they all support the killing of sons and daughters in the womb. That's something I just can't get on board with. So that's probably the biggest issue for me. But I know a lot of people, they don't feel that way about that issue. Okay, let's see. I feel like I'll look on the portrait a little bit. Someone says, I know those pro-abortion people talk so bad about kids, like they're not human. It sickens me. Yeah, well, that's the whole position. That's why I made a video responding about the left, when the left calls or compares the right to Nazis, because like somebody compared me to a sculptor that sculpted Hitler because I was sculpting Charlie Kirk. And so they're comparing me to, basically, me to a Nazi, Charlie Kirk to a Nazi. And as far as I know, I don't know anything about the sculptor other than that I just looked him up quick. The actual, like, arguments that the left uses for abortion, they're like the exact same. It's the exact same arguments that they used, that the Nazis used to justify their genocide. That they're not really human, that they're not it's not really a person, not really human. Life, like society would be better without them. They're a burden. They're dependent. They're not fully developed. Like these are all, it's like all the same arguments. But I mean, if you're gonna argue for killing someone, then there's not a lot of good arguments. So you have to use kind of the same arguments. Also the same, same arguments for slavery, treating people as property, saying, my property, my choice. Like if you don't want slaves, you don't have them, but you don't have a right to tell us not to have slaves. That was kind of the attitude. And so when the left uses those same arguments and then claims that the right is closer of a philosophy to the Nazis than they are, I think that that's inaccurate. I'd say if you use the arguments of the Nazis to kill an innocent human being, if you're using those arguments, then you're closer to the philosophy that the Nazi held than those that don't use those arguments at all. And they'll say, well, what about like the illegal immigrants? Isn't rounding people up, like, isn't that what the Nazis did? And I'd say, like, well, then you're just talking about law enforcement. You're just talking about, like, people enforcing laws. Maybe you think that they're unjust laws, but they are laws that are on the books, and people don't have a right to break our laws. So I'd say there's definitely a moral distinction between killing an innocent son or daughter and taking somebody that came here illegally and sending them back to where they came from. I think that those things aren't morally comparable. They're different. So it says I just spawned in an infinite amount of clay. Did you receive it? Yeah, an infinite amount of clay would be nice. That would be a useful superpower to probably only me. Well, I guess maybe to a couple other people, but. Charlie Kirk's been a difficult portrait to pin down, for sure. Well, really anybody. The likeness of anybody is difficult because people are so good at judging the facial differences between individuals that anything that's even remotely off is going to be very distracting when it comes to a likeness. But some people just come together a little bit easier, and some people are a little bit more of a struggle. I felt like it was coming together easier at the beginning, and then it became more of a struggle later on. Just how it goes a lot of the time for me. It's like the beginning feels good, and then I have a hard time finishing and making things look great. Somebody's asking, what are your hobbies? Other than sculpting, I really like table tennis, ping pong, though I haven't been playing as much. I used to teach at the university when I was in Logan, Utah. I would teach table tennis there, and that was really fun. So I haven't been able to play like I used to. And we would compete against other schools and stuff. I really liked that. So table tennis is like one I really like. I also juggled, but it's been a while since I've practiced, but I was really into juggling when I was younger. And art, you know. Fortunately, I'm able to make one of my hobbies produce some income, though it's not an incredible amount, but teaching people how to sculpt is something I really enjoy. So I'm blessed to be able to do that. Somebody's asking, how many references do you use? Well, as many as I can find, and whenever I find a new reference, I try to save it. Like ideally you'd have like professional sculptors that are able to hire people for portraits, or able to have people sit for portraits, like they're hired professionally to do it. What they'll usually do is they'll take photos of the entire head turning around, so they'll have like or a video maybe of the person turning around, spinning around in a chair or something, from the front, from above, from below, making the expression that they want. And that's like, ideally, that's the ideal situation. And then you're also able to take direct measurements from them using calipers. And, you know, that's the kind of ideal situation. I'm not able to do any of that. And so I just have to collect references that I can find, and then also just try to, you know, watch videos and observe and try to do the best I can with that. But if I see a reference that's that gives helpful clues as to what's happening on the portrait, then I try to save those. And I just build a folder with it, and maybe I'll have, you know, maybe I'll have 40 photos or 40 or 50 photos, but then I'll just use, you know, one or two at a time to try to capture different things. And then sometimes, like right now, I have on the screen where I can see it, just some video of Charlie Kirk, and that kind of lets me see him as he's moving in front of the camera, kind of get a sense of his features a little bit better. Though it's, you know, again, it's not perfect, and there are better ways that would make it easier, but I don't have access to any of those. So, you know, I wonder if they took a death mask. That's something that sometimes they'll do with famous individuals. It's death mask isn't perfect because it does change the features when you're face down, and you don't have the muscles or anything to support the structure of your face. Usually the death mask will change you a little bit because your jaw kind of sinks back into your face a little bit, and so that's just reality. But I wonder if they took a death mask. I haven't heard anything about that, so I have no idea. But that's something they did with Joseph Smith, who was also a martyr for what he believed. And he was actually running for president at the time, so he's the first presidential candidate who was assassinated while he was a candidate for president. He was the first one that happened to, and in American history. And they took a death mask of him, but I think it changed his features a little bit, and now a lot of the sculptures look, they look kind of like a death mask and then a painting that was painted of him. But I think his own wife, Emma Smith, said that the painting didn't look like him, that it didn't quite capture it. So it's difficult. I guess it would have been a lot more difficult back then. But even now, if you want to sculpt somebody from history or something, all you have are references of other artists oftentimes. Though I think there was a daguerreotype, which is like an early form of photography that they did use. And there's some debate over whether there was recently uncovered a photo that they think was Joseph Smith, but it's quite different than the artistic representation. So it's like people wonder if that's what he looked like or not. But it's interesting, this line of work of trying to capture a likeness for a sculpture of somebody. Utah, the lands of gems, stones, and sulfur. Yeah, well, Utah's got a lot of stone. It's got it even has some white marble that's actually pretty nice. It's a hard, firm white marble. I had some pieces of it. I'll have to get some more at some point. But yeah, Utah's got some great stone. It's got Picasso marble, which is like a colorful limestone, one of my favorite stones to sculpt, very abstract in the design. It's like a painting. It's like somebody painted it already. And then there's honeycomb calcite is also from Utah. That's a popular stone for sculpture. Pretty stone. And there's some black marble that I've gotten from Utah. Black Utah marble is nice. It's got some cool designs going through it. Ooh, that's a little bit bright. Let me darken. Somebody's asking if I was born in Utah. No, I was born in Sacramento, California. Sacramento, California. But moved to Utah when I was little. Lived most of my life in Utah. And served a 2-year mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That was the Albuquerque, New Mexico mission, Spanish speaking. But a lot of my time was in El Paso, Texas area there, and just outside of it in a little town called Chaparral. Chaparral. And Chaparral, New Mexico. So I lived in Albuquerque for a little bit during that mission, then came back to Utah. When we were first married, we lived there, and now I'm in Iowa. But I do miss Utah. Utah's great. It's got a good feeling about it. Good spirit to the place. People seem to be a little bit more friendly over there. Though Iowa's not too bad. Get a little bit darker. his brows really do go to like a sharp edge right where his eyebrows are. It's like from what I'm seeing from the video that I'm watching of him. Kind of hard, tricky to get, but important, because I think that's what made the shadows of his eye sockets so distinct, was that the way that brow ridge just kind of drops off. A lot of the likeness from the portrait is from the area around the eyes, not the eyes themselves necessarily, but the structure around the eyes. So this is an important, even though it doesn't seem like it, getting this forehead, the transition to the eye sockets right is really important for a good likeness. You're the one who made me fall in love with black marble. I love the black marble sculpture he did. Yeah, the black marble is really fun. It's really nice to work with. It's a little bit crumbly, so chisels. I mostly use an angle grinder and cutting and grinding for most of the stuff I've done with that, but it's really nice. Holds a polish really nice. It doesn't do too well outdoors, so because it's technically a limestone, so it kind of dissolves in the rain. So it's kind of an indoor stone for sculpture. But for medium and small sculptures that can be inside, it's a really nice stone for that. But outdoor stuff, I would maybe use something, maybe a granite or a basalt would be better if you want black stone outside. A black granite or a black basalt. Sounds like a good video idea, tips on how to sculpt with black marble. Oh yeah, well, I'm working on a course, if I can get it. I can get it finished. Okay, I think I'm gonna end this session here. Maybe I'll be back to it later, we'll see. But I've got other things to do. If you're interested in sculpting, like to learn how to sculpt people, then I recommend checking out the sculpture courses in the description of the video. They're a great resource to learn traditional sculpting techniques in clay, and that's a great place to start. Even if you're interested in stone or wood or other materials, a clay foundation for figurative sculpting is really helpful, really important. And so, yeah, I'll be back at it again another time. Somebody's asking, do you think you'll ever do any small figure type stuff? Well, most of the stuff I do is small, like Simon Lee. Simon Lee, it sounds familiar. I'd have to look up the name, though, to see what he does. But most of my figurative stuff is smaller. This is like the largest that I've done. All right, we'll see you guys around.